If we define extrema as maximums or minimums, we want to make a slight difference here between what we consider an absolute maximum or minimum and a relative maximum or minimum. Remember, an absolute maximum or minimum at some critical point x equals c, then the value of f of c is greater than or equal to f of x for all x in the interval if it's a maximum, or f of c is less than or equal to f of x for all x in that interval. A relative maximum or minimum is going to occur at some point x equals c where either f of c is greater than or equal to f of x for all x in the vicinity, or f of c is less than or equal to f of x for all x in the vicinity. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, let's look at our graph right here. We've got some function f of x that happens to be defined with this graph. And we can see that, for example, at x equals c1, we've got an absolute minimum. Right? We're going to go ahead and label this. Here's our absolute minimum at c1, right? It's f of c1, according to the graph, is less than or equal to all the other f of x on the interval from a to b. And at x equals b, right, our endpoint right here, we have an absolute maximum. And of course, at this absolute maximum point right here, f of b is greater than or equal to all the values of f of x within the interval, and so that's an absolute maximum. But what happens, what could we say about all these interior points where it looks like we certainly do come to some kind of maximum right here? Well, we're going to call these points relative maximums or minimums. So right here, for example, at C2, f of C2 is greater than or equal to the values of f of x in its vicinity, that is near f of c, right? So we could say, well, okay, if we're within some small little vicinity of c2, we've got a relative maximum point right here. Likewise, right here at c3, if we're within the vicinity of that point, then f of c3 is less than or equal to the values of x near it. So in the vicinity, I'm talking about just some small little interval interior to our overall interval from a to b right here for this function, where we have either a minimum or a maximum as compared to the points around it. All absolute minimums and all absolute maximums are also relative, right? Because by that definition, all those values are near. Now, what could I say about this endpoint right here? I do want to be very careful, and we should note, if we have an endpoint and it is not the absolute maximum or absolute minimum, then we just simply don't consider it at all. We just will ignore that, right? So right over here, we could say that at x equals a, yeah, the value of f of a is greater than some of the values near it, but we simply ignore that fact and say, well, it's not a maximum or a minimum for the purposes of deciding whether or not we've got a critical number. So if it's an endpoint and it's not the absolute maximum or minimum, ignore it.